you guys asked for it, so today I'm going to do it. And that is a week or two ago, I did a video on home defense guns and what makes a good home defense gun. You know, we started with crappy substitutes that people are using, then we moved to, well, what is adequate, and then the logical outgrowth of that is the pursuit, where are we headed, and we came up with something that looks like this as the go-to for a home defense gun. And the logical question from there is, Kurt, what is that? I gotta go get one. Well, pump the brakes a little bit. Many of you asked for make and model and all that sort of. This is a construction, and I'm going to say that more than most likely for you, when it comes to your go-to home defense gun, it isn't going to be a pull it out of the box and set it in the corner thing. There are lots of things that go into a home defense gun that do not come from the factory, right? There's going to be some finagling that has to be done on your part. Now, I do suggest that if you are not super technically bound, that you do purchase something and then work off there. But if you've got minimal technical skills, then you can put one of these things together and get it running relatively easily. That said, what I'm going to do in this video is give you an overview of the rifle here with the intent that you not carbon copy this, because it may not be the gun for you, but there are a series of overarching principles and tenets that I used to construct this gun for my needs. They may or may not all apply to you, but it at least give you a place to get those wheels turning so that you can put the thing together that meets your specifications, right? Are you squared away on your medical gear? If not, this is the ad for you. We talk a whole bunch about poking holes in things and blowing stuff up on this channel, and y'all kind of enjoy that. You might want to perhaps have the ability to fix some of those holes, right? So what I have for you here today is a collaboration with Everlit Survival and AceTac. This is their advanced trauma kit. I have a full video that I'll have linked in the appropriate places for you guys to go check out, see if it's good value for you. And they're offering VSO subscribers a 10% discount if you use my code listed over at the affiliates page. So the first thing I'm going to start off with by saying is that this gun is in 5.56. That is a point of contention. Many people pointed out in the original video, why did you choose 5.56 over like 300 blackout for home defense, particularly in a short barrel? And that's a preference thing, right? I have a ton of 5.56 magazines, and not all of them are great for 300 blackout. So I typically, because I have lots of 5.56 guns and only a couple 300 blackout guns, I typically leave the 300 blackout magazines unloaded, because if you mix 300 blackout into 5.56 guns, you get a big kaboom. And not the time when you are worried about self-defense inside the home. It is not a time to accidentally pipe a 300 blackout round. So I chose 5.56 because there are many more 5.56 guns that I could potentially have to hand to somebody if I'm in a more than one situation. And I would rather have all the 5.56 mags loaded than the 300 blackout magazines. So that is a kind of a process thing. Again, that's up to you and how you want to handle that. The next thing I will say is that this is a registered short barrel rifle. So if you live in a locale that you can't have a short barrel rifle, then yours is probably going to take the form of a pistol. Just keep that in mind. The reason we go with a shorter barrel is a couple considerations. One, if you're going to run a suppressor, if you choose to run a suppressor, then you want to trade barrel length for suppressor length, right? Because if this was a 16-inch barrel, I think this is an 11-inch gun. And because of that, it comes to there. But if it had a suppressor on it, it would be out here. And if it was a 16-inch gun, the suppressor would be all the way out here. So turning the corners is much more difficult with a longer gun inside of a confined space like your home. The other thing about that, secondary benefits, are the barrels are much more rigid. And typically you can concentrate more mass in the barrel on a shorter barrel than a longer barrel. This is a medium taper, and even with that medium taper, all the weight is concentrated towards the rear instead of at the front. This gun is relatively balanced on its center point, and you can see it even balances a little bit rearward on purpose so that it goes into the hand and can be held up with a single hand. Maybe you're injured or something like that, allowing you to have a better chance of operating the gun in a compromised situation, right? So that's why we go with the short barrel. Now, that does come with compromises, but those are compromises that I'm willing to accept. Out of this 11.5-inch barrel, I think that's what this thing is. I checked, it is 11.5. We're still getting like 2,300, 2,400 feet per second, depending on the load out of this gun. More than enough velocity to do what we need it to do. It is going to suffer at those longer distances, but when we're talking about home defense, inside the home, those are really not things that we're concerned about. We're concerned about in the home and the outlying yard. We're not necessarily concerned about the entire homestead at that point in time. We have other guns that are for that particular thing. This is inside the confines of the building. So 11.5 inches, 2,400 feet per second, plenty enough. That's sort of like, oh, well, it's not as good as 400 yards. You're right, it isn't. But neither is a 16-inch gun compared to an 18 or 20-inch gun. So it's always a series of compromises. Now, the next thing that I would say is that a lot of people get hung up on the receiver of your gun. And what I would say is that all the manufacturers out there make a certain quality of receiver. You can throw a whole lot of money at a high-end receiver if you want to, or you can go a little bit cheaper. In fact, this one is built on a Poverty Pony lower, but if you know what you're looking for when it comes to the lower receiver, then you can get away with something that is a little bit on the cheaper side if you know what to look for. Don't get me wrong. I've had several of these Poverty Pony lowers that are absolute garbage and are unbuildable upon. This one is actually pretty good. If you don't know what it is that you're looking for, if you're new to the whole game, then save yourself the headache. Go out and just spend a couple extra bucks on a more expensive receiver. The other deviation on this gun that you will find from a normal AR is that this one is got a short stroke system on it. And this is the dead foot arm system. So this gun can be fired while folded. There are other ways to get that done. This has done that by reducing the carrier. And the byproduct of that is that this will not only fire folded, but the reciprocating mass is lower in this gun. And that reduces the recoil to basically nothing. It also allows us to attach all of this metal to the rear here in case we have to use it as a melee weapon. Because remember, the root word of gunfight is not gun. Moving right along, some kind of retention system. This is a Savvy Sniper Sling. This is the kind with the H&K hooks, and then I've got it clipped into some GG&G forged QD swivel studs. Personal preference on that, right? I don't necessarily advocate that it be out like this. You might have it stowed on the gun. Some way to hang the gun without dropping it, right? Go hands-free. Whether you need to access the electrical panel to cut the power to the house, or whether you need to fix a wound or something like that, and you just don't want your gun bouncing around on the ground, right? Moving on to sights. And you can see we have two types of sights on here. We have iron sights and a Trijicon MRO. This isn't a 1/3 co-witness mount because what I've chosen to do is use fixed sights. The reason I have fixed sights on this is so that they're always in the same place regardless if I had to hit somebody with this. Remember, this might end up being a melee weapon. So you use the 1/3 co-witness if you're using fixed iron sights, and you can use the absolute co-witness if you're using folding sights. Personal preference, I think about it like this. I want those sights to be in the same place regardless. And then to aid in that, this dual aperture sight here at the back, if I flip it about halfway, then it falls out of the way and the entire screen of the MRO is clear for me to use. So that is also in a QD mount from Midwest Industries if I need to rip the whole thing off, right? So if it absolutely like takes a round or something like that, it's completely unusable anymore, I can cut it away and I don't have to worry about it anymore. I am somewhat of a purist in that I don't want a whole lot of ambidextrous control on this gun. Of course, the training regiment that I have taken over the years does not really use the ping pong paddle all that much. So again, your decision on whether you want that extended bolt latch on the side or if you want ambidextrous controls on your gun, that's something that you're going to have to choose whether you want or not. Personally, not for me. But what I am adamant about is that the charging handle be able to be accessed from both sides of the gun. Because again, you don't know how you're going to be situated and where you're going to be situated in that sort of situation. And you may have to operate the gun in a manner that you're not used to operating it in. Whether you're in an disadvantageous position, or whether you're wounded, you might have to access it. And the charging handle is by far the most important control on the AR-15. It fixes everything, so having it being accessible regardless of the orientation of the gun is important. And then the other thing that I think that must be present on this gun is this forward assist here. And the reason that is if you've got debris blowing around in the building, there's a chance that you might get one of those. And a simple other things like lights, lasers, etc., what you need to have on this thing is a high quality light. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about lights. Now, I'm not paid to say anything about this brand or any other brand as far as lights are concerned. But what I choose to put on the home defense gun is the TLR1 HL. Now, there's some people that are already screaming, "Oh, it'll blow out your night vision because it's too bright." This is your primary weapon. But this is your secondary weapon. When you flash somebody with this light, yes, if you ND it into a white wall, I don't care what kind of light you are using, is going to give you the purple spots, right? Don't do that. When you take this light, and I want you to do this yourself at home, set it across the room, and then take your pistol and point it at it, right? The iron sights of your pistol, the iron sights themselves are going to round. You're going to become unable to find the center of those sights, or less likely to find the center of those sights, because your vision is going to be blown out from that bright light in your face. It's going to be harder to find the geometry of those sights. If somebody is looking at you through a red dot sight and you hit them with one of these, that dot, if it is set up for normal ambient light conditions, is going to disappear. And you can test this yourself. Go ahead and do it. Point your red dot at like a TLR1 HL or something like that and turn it on and tell me if you can see the light, or see if you can see the dot at the normal setting that you were just using. That is another tool in your arsenal when you are talking about disorientation in the home. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on as far as disorientation is concerned, another piece of kit that you should consider having attached to your rifle is a set of hearing protection. Because if you have a break like this and you cook this off inside your house, everybody is going to be deaf. Now, there's a couple schools of thought there. You might be doing that on purpose to disorient you and anybody else who's potentially inside the house. It is going to be crushingly loud. It's going to be super scary. And there's a lot to be said for that whole, like, hey, if you got like 6 dudes that are that just kicked in your door and you cook off a 11.5-inch 5.56 gun in the house, the first 1 or 2 might already be inside, but the other 4 are not stepping across that threshold, because it is super scary. You have to know that in doing that, you are going to be subject to whatever hate you just laid down, you're going to absorb as well. Now, you are expecting that to happen. If you've been exposed to that before, you can overcome that. I have not been in a physical shooting or anything like that, but I have been in shoot houses where hearing protection has become compromised, and you can work through it if you are expecting it to happen. Who is not expecting it to happen are the people on the receiving end. The other mitigating thing that you could do, perhaps, to cut that down a bit is to use a suppressor. But that is not a right now solution. Still, as a FFL SOT, it's still taken 5 to 8 months for your Form 4s to come back. So it is not a right meow situation and a right now solution to just go get a suppressor. Now, if you want to pack that in for something that's going to happen down the road, then yes, suppressors are definitely home defense viable. You just have to have a little bit prior planning. You're not going to accomplish it in the weekend like you could with something like this. So outside of the whole SBR aspect of it. So I hope this gave you a little bit of insight into what I consider when I'm talking about a home defense gun. Again, not necessarily a carbon copy of this gun, but perhaps some of the thought process of this firearm might guide you in putting your own together. So I hope that you learned something in today's video. If you did, then sound off in the comment section down below. Interacting with the video does absolutely tell the machine that more people need to see the video. And of course, we would like to get this information out to as many people as possible. So I greatly appreciate you, and hopefully we'll see you in another video here at the VSO Gun Channel.